One of the least discussed realities of the Korean War is how quickly modern armies rediscovered old vulnerabilities. If you're interested in the kind of military history that examines what actually preserved life under sustained pressure, rather than what looked advanced on a logistics chart, consider subscribing to Echoes of Valor. This channel focuses on lessons that endured because they worked, not because they were fashionable. The shelter practices that carried forward from World War II into Korea and far beyond were not clever tricks. They were disciplined responses to exposure, fatigue, and environmental reality. 5 in particular continue to save lives today, not only in military contexts but in disaster response, wilderness survival, and civilian preparedness. The first lesson was that digging down protected soldiers better than building up. In Korea, this lesson returned with urgency. Units that failed to dig deep enough suffered greater cold exposure, even when wrapped in issued gear. Those who understood World War II practice knew to prioritize depth, slope, and runoff channels before anything else. The earth absorbed cold slowly and released heat slowly, buying time and preserving body temperature. In 2025, this principle underlies modern emergency shelters, cold weather bivouacs, and disaster trenches. When weather overwhelms infrastructure, going down, not up, remains one of the most reliable survival decisions. Veterans learned that airflow mattered more than sealing a shelter completely. A common mistake among inexperienced troops in World War II was over-sealing shelters. The instinct was understandable: keep wind out, trap warmth in. But airtight shelters accumulated moisture, carbon monoxide, and condensation that soaked clothing and bedding. Over time, these shelters became colder, not warmer. Experienced soldiers learned to build controlled airflow into shelters. Small ventilation gaps near the roofline or leeward side prevented moisture buildup while preserving heat. In cold climates, this reduced frost accumulation inside shelters. And, in hot environments, it prevented heat exhaustion and respiratory illness. The Korean War exposed the cost of ignoring this. Poorly ventilated bunkers contributed to illness and hypothermia even when temperatures outside were manageable. Modern shelter design, from military field tents to emergency housing, still reflects this World War II earned understanding that breathable shelter outperforms sealed shelter over time. Elevation from the ground quietly became a survival priority. Another hard lesson from World War II was that the ground itself was often the enemy. Soil conducted cold, retained moisture, and harbored insects and pathogens. Soldiers who slept directly on the ground lost heat faster and developed injuries and infections at higher rates. Veterans learned to elevate sleeping surfaces whenever possible, using boards, branches, ammunition crates, or packed earth platforms. Even just a few inches of separation, reduced heat loss dramatically and really improved sleep quality. That, in turn, helped preserve judgment and reaction time. In Korea's harsh winters, this difference could honestly become life-altering. Elevated sleeping arrangements, they reduced the risk of frostbite and helped improve recovery during those limited rest periods. Nowadays, this very same principle is actually built into modern cold-weather camping disaster shelters and even refugee housing. Ground separation isn't just about comfort, it's about insulation. Shelter placement, believe it or not, mattered more than shelter strength. World War II taught soldiers that where a shelter was placed often mattered more than how well it was built. Veterans looked for leeward slopes, natural drainage paths, tree cover that blocked wind without inviting collapse, and soil that could be shaped without flooding. These choices were often made instinctively by men who had seen what went wrong before. During the Korean War, Units unfamiliar with these lessons paid for them when shelters flooded, froze, or collapsed under snow load. Modern survival training continues to emphasize site selection as a primary skill because World War II demonstrated that no shelter compensates for bad placement. The most effective shelters were designed for endurance, not emergencies. Perhaps the most overlooked World War II shelter lesson was that shelters had to function over weeks, not hours. Temporary solutions that worked for a night often failed catastrophically over time. Moisture accumulated, structural fatigue set in, minor design flaws multiplied. Veteran soldiers reinforced shelters gradually, improved drainage continuously, and modified layouts based on lived conditions rather than original plans. Shelter became a living system, not a finished product. This mindset shaped post-war military engineering doctrine, and, it actually carries forward into modern long-term shelters used in humanitarian crises and remote operations. A shelter that can be improved incrementally is, honestly, more valuable than one that is perfect on day one. What these shelter hacks reveal is how slowly the fundamentals of survival change. World War II stripped shelter down to essentials: thermal control, moisture management, airflow, placement, and sustainability. What changes is not the environment, but our willingness to remember. Each generation is tempted to believe it has outgrown old lessons. History repeatedly proves otherwise. These shelter practices still save lives in 2025 because they align with physical reality, not doctrine. They respect how heat moves, how water behaves, and how the human body endures stress. Remembering them is not an academic exercise, it is an act of preparedness. If you value historical analysis that treats survival knowledge as something earned and preserved, subscribe to Echoes of Valor and share this video with others who care about serious military history. The past continues to speak, especially when we are willing to listen.